Hi, I am Sophia. Welcome to True Payback, where story hits, different hits subscribe. Let's dive in.
The Gala My brother used to say I had a gift for disappearing. He meant it as an insult the way he meant most things he said to me. At family dinners when I was 12 and he was 17, he would wave his hand in my direction as though erasing something from a whiteboard. She fades into the background, he told his friends once, not bothering to lower his voice. He stopped noticing her after a while. I heard him. I always heard him. I just learned very early that what he saw as fading was something else entirely. I was watching, filing, building a picture of how the world actually worked when people believed no one was paying attention. That skill, that particular gift, would eventually be worth more to me than anything Marcus ever stumbled into. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Diane Osei-Mensah. I am 38 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in the West Loop neighborhood of Chicago, which I own outright, with a small balcony that looks toward the skyline rather than away from it. That detail matters more to me than it probably should. I have a 6-year-old daughter named Lily whose favorite things in precise order are her grandmother's jollof rice, the animated film she has watched 47 times, and a stuffed elephant named Gerald who has survived 2 moves, 1 airline flight, and a minor emergency involving a hotel bathtub. I know the count on the film because I watched it with her the first 12 times and kept track after that out of something between love and mild competitive instinct. I run a private equity firm called Meridian Capital Partners. We manage approximately $340 million in assets under management. I started it at 31 with $800,000 in seed capital I had spent 4 years accumulating through a combination of consulting income, careful angel investing, and a single early-stage bet on a logistics software company that returned 11 times my investment when it was acquired. My brother Marcus does not know any of this. Or rather, he did not know any of this. Not until the night of the gala. Marcus is 43. He is handsome in the way that men who were once athletic and have since become comfortable are handsome. Broad through the shoulders, a little soft around the jaw, the kind of face that photographs well at a distance. He has our father's confidence and our mother's ability to make everyone in a room feel like they are the most important person there, right up until the moment he needs something from them. He started Vertex Technologies in 2018 with a college roommate named Joel Hartley and $2 million in seed funding from our uncle Kwame, who believed in Marcus the way our family always believed in Marcus, completely, without conditions, without the small calibrating skepticism that might have served everyone better. Vertex built project management software targeted at mid-size construction firms. It was not a bad idea. The execution was uneven. Marcus was a gifted salesman and a careless operator, which is a combination that works extremely well until it doesn't. By 2021, Vertex had decent revenue, a loyal customer base in the Midwest, and a structural problem with its financial architecture that Marcus had been papering over with bridge loans and handshake deals. I knew this because I had been watching Vertex since its 2nd year. Not out of malice. Out of the same habit I had developed at 12. The habit of paying attention when no one thought I was. When Vertex's Series B process quietly stalled in late 2021 and Marcus started calling our mother twice a week instead of twice a month, I understood what was happening. I spent 3 weeks doing diligence through a shell entity, running the numbers 6 different ways and arriving at the same conclusion each time. The business was sound at its core and broken at its edges, and the right capital partner could fix the edges without destroying what worked. I made an anonymous investment of $4.2 million through a holding company called Lakefront Capital LLC. Lakefront held no public presence. The principals were listed through a registered agent in Delaware. My name appeared nowhere. Marcus and Joel took the capital, restructured 2 underperforming contracts, hired an operations director, and closed a Series B 6 months later. Over the following 18 months, I made 3 additional investments through Lakefront, increasing my position each time as the business scaled. By January of this year, Lakefront Capital held 81% of Vertex's voting shares. I did not do this to trap Marcus. I want to be precise about that because the story I am about to tell you could easily be read that way, and I would rather you understand the actual truth. I did it because it was a sound investment. And I did it anonymously because I knew with absolute certainty that if Marcus discovered his younger sister was his majority shareholder, he would either reject the capital entirely or spend the next 5 years making every boardroom interaction a referendum on the childhood hierarchy he had spent our entire lives enforcing. Either outcome was bad for the business. Either outcome was bad for Lily's college fund. So I stayed quiet. I watched. I let Vertex grow. And I waited without specifically intending to, for the night Marcus would make the mistake that made silence impossible. That night was the Harrington Gala. The Harrington is the Midwest's largest annual private equity networking event. It's held every October at the Langham, Chicago, in a ballroom that overlooks the river and is decorated, every year without variation, with white orchids and the collected ambitions of approximately 400 people who believe they are about to make the deal that changes everything. I attend every year. I have a table. My partners attend with me. Rachel Kim, who runs our healthcare portfolio and who I have watched negotiate 3 men out of claiming credit for her work in a single calendar year. And David Okonkwo, who was my first hire and who has the rare quality of being both genuinely kind and genuinely relentless. My friend Sasha, who is a corporate attorney and my closest friend since law school, usually comes as my guest. This year she was in London on a transaction that had already delayed twice. I attended alone. I was wearing a midnight blue wrap dress and low heels, which I mention because Marcus would later describe me to someone as having shown up underdressed. And I want the record to reflect that the dress was Giorgio Armani and the heels were Ferragamo, and I chose both specifically because they communicated money to people who understood clothes and nothing to people who didn't. I arrived at 7:15. The gala started at 7. I have never in my professional life arrived at anything on time, because being slightly late to events where you are known means you enter a room that is already oriented and can read it clearly. Arriving on time means you stand in a filling room performing patience. I checked my coat, accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray, and positioned myself near the northeast corner of the room, beside a column of marble that had excellent sight lines in 3 directions. That is when I saw Marcus. He was near the entrance and he was doing what Marcus does best, working a room with the focused efficiency of someone who has rehearsed the route. He moved from cluster to cluster, laughing, touching arms, leaning in close to make each person feel singled out. Joel Hartley was beside him, slightly behind, doing the work of remembering names that Marcus would never quite retain. I watched Marcus pull aside 3 men I recognized: Edward Crane, who was Vertex's lead Series B investor, a younger man I didn't know by name but whose firm's logo I had seen on the attendee list, and a woman named Patricia Lowell who ran a growth equity fund out of Minneapolis. He was briefing them on something. I was 50 feet away and the room was loud, but I have spent enough years reading the geometry of conversations to understand the structure. He was managing them, orienting them against something or someone. I didn't yet know it was me. I moved to the bar, ordered still water with lemon, and found Rachel near the east wall talking to a pair of venture partners from a firm we'd co-invested with twice. I joined the conversation, contributed for 10 minutes, extracted myself gracefully. I spoke with a real estate developer I'd been meaning to meet for 2 months. I found David and checked in on 3 portfolio items in under 4 minutes of standing conversation because David and I have the shorthand of people who have been through bad quarters together. At some point during all of this, Marcus noticed I was there. I saw it happen in my peripheral vision. The precise moment his gaze found me across the room and his expression shifted. Not dramatically. Just slightly. The way a calculation changes when a new variable appears. He crossed the room to me. Diane. He said my name the way he always said my name, like it was a fact he was mildly disappointed to confirm. Marcus. I smiled. Congratulations on the Series C announcement. I saw the press release. Something crossed his face at that, a flicker of something I couldn't fully read. He recovered immediately. Thanks. Big night for us. A lot of the right people are here. The right people are always here, I said. That's why I come. He paused. Then, what is it you're doing these days? Still consulting. I had not done pure consulting work in 7 years. He knew this and didn't know this. The particular quality of knowing that comes from not having paid attention. Something like that, I said. He nodded, already looking past me. I've got to make some rounds. Don't. He gestured vaguely at the room. Don't approach my investors tonight, okay? It's a big pitch cycle and I need the conversations clean. He said it the way he would say it to a child who had wandered onto a stage. Gently. Like I should be grateful for the guidance. Of course, I said. He moved away. I turned back toward the river view and stood quietly, finishing my water. 22 minutes later, Edward Crane found me. I had met Edward Crane once, briefly, at an industry conference in 2022. He knew Meridian Capital by reputation. We had been in a deal together at One Remove, two portfolio companies in adjacent markets, and he had been trying through Rachel to find time to talk about a potential co-investment. I had not made time yet because our current fund was nearly deployed and I was in early conversations about Fund 3. Edward crossed the room with the particular directness of someone who has just confirmed something he suspected. Diane Osei-Mensah, he said, extending his hand. Thought that was you. Edward Crane Capital. I know who you are, Edward. I shook his hand. Good to see you. He glanced once briefly toward the area where Marcus was standing with his group. Then back at me. I have to ask you something directly. Please. Lakefront Capital. He said it quietly. Not secretly, just the volume of a man being precise. That's yours, isn't it? It was not a question by the end. I looked at him for a moment. 17 months of careful anonymity. A Delaware registered agent. 2 layers of holding structure specifically designed for this kind of durability. And Edward Crane had figured it out by standing in a room with me for 20 minutes. What gave it away? I asked. He smiled. The operational memo from Q3 last year. The language. I've read enough of your public writing to recognize the framework. The way you described the customer retention problem, it's the same framing you used in a panel I attended at Kellogg. He paused. I confirmed it this afternoon through a contact at the registered agent. I considered this. Then I nodded once. It's mine, I said. Edward exhaled, not with surprise exactly, but with the satisfaction of a resolved question. So you hold 81% of voting shares, I said. Through 4 tranches over 30 months. He was quiet for a moment. Around us, the gala continued. 400 people in formal wear, the clink of glasses, the low roar of aggregate ambition. Edward looked toward Marcus again, more openly this time. He doesn't know, Edward said. He does not know, I confirmed. Edward's expression was careful, professional, and underneath both of those things, deeply entertained. He told me tonight to, he stopped himself, to treat me as a non-factor, I finished. In somewhat more polite terms. He's used less polite terms, I said. I've survived those too. Edward laughed. A real laugh, short and genuine. Then he became serious again. Diane, I need to be clear about something. We are in active diligence on our Series C participation. $40 million. If the cap table looks the way I'm now understanding it looks, there are things I need to know before that closes. There are things you should know, I agreed. I've been intending to come out of the structure before the Series C anyway. The timeline just became concrete. Tonight. I thought about Marcus briefing his investors by the entrance. The hand gesture. Don't approach my investors. 23 years of being the variable he didn't factor. Tonight seems right, I said. Edward nodded. Then, do you want me to? No, I said. I'll handle it. I set my empty glass on the tray of a passing server, smoothed the front of my dress, and walked toward my brother. Marcus was mid-sentence when I reached his group. He was telling a story, the kind of story he told well, the kind with a punchline already visible in his posture before the words arrived. Joel was laughing in advance. Patricia Lowell was smiling politely. The younger investor whose name I still didn't know was nodding. I stopped at the edge of the group and waited. Marcus finished the story. The group laughed. He turned and saw me. His expression did the thing it did. The mild recalibration, the performance of patience. Diane, I said. Marcus. I said it the same way he always said my name. The fact I was confirming. I need a moment. This really isn't the time. It is actually. I looked at Joel. Joel, good to see you. You've done excellent work on the operations restructure. The Q3 retention numbers were strong. Joel blinked. Thanks. How did you? Patricia. I turned to Patricia Lowell. Meridian Capital. We haven't met formally, but we were in adjacent positions on the Clearwater deal in 2022. I've admired your fund's healthcare thesis. Patricia looked at me with the recalibrated attention of someone updating a prior. Diane Osei-Mensah. Yes, Rachel Kim is your partner. She is. Marcus stepped slightly toward me, lowering his voice. Diane, what are you doing? I'm introducing myself, I said calmly, which I should have done a long time ago in a different context, but that's a longer conversation. I looked at the group. I'm the managing partner of Meridian Capital Partners. We manage $340 million in assets. And I am also, through a holding structure called Lakefront Capital, the controlling shareholder of Vertex Technologies. The sentence landed in the group the way a stone lands in still water. Joel went very still. Patricia's polite smile held, but her eyes sharpened. The younger investor looked from me to Marcus and back. Marcus said, What are you talking about? Lakefront Capital, I said. Delaware LLC. The $4.2 million Series A bridge in February 2022. The 3 follow-on investments over the following 18 months. 81% of voting shares held through a blind structure. I paused. I've been your majority shareholder for 14 months, Marcus. The silence that followed had weight to it. That's not, Marcus stopped. Started again. That's not possible. Our cap table. Your cap table lists Lakefront Capital as the majority position. It has since the restructure. I looked at him steadily. You signed the shareholder agreement. Joel countersigned. The registered agent is on file in Delaware. I can send you the documents tonight if you need to see them, but I suspect you already know I'm telling you the truth. Marcus's face had gone through several things in rapid succession. I watched each one. Disbelief, recalculation, a flash of genuine anger, and then something underneath the anger that I recognized because I had seen it before. The specific humiliation of realizing you have been wrong in front of people whose opinion matters to you. You did this without telling me, he said. I invested in a sound business, I said. I did it anonymously because I knew you would reject the capital if you knew it came from me. I was right. You would have. I let that sit for a moment. The business is worth 11 times what it was before the first investment. The operational improvements you and Joel made with that capital were real. I didn't do this to you, Marcus. I did it for Vertex. You did it for Vertex, he repeated. He had found a note somewhere between fury and a kind of terrible blankness. And for Lily's college fund, I said. But mostly for Vertex. Edward Crane had moved to stand at the edge of our group. I hadn't watched him approach. I had felt it, the way you feel the shift in a room when someone with authority repositions. He stood beside Patricia Lowell now. Marcus, Edward said. The Series C conversation needs to continue in the morning with full documentation and with Diane at the table. He said it pleasantly, the way people say things that are not actually requests. Marcus looked at Edward. Then at me. His jaw moved slightly. Joel touched his arm. Marcus. Quietly. We should step out for a minute. I'm fine, Marcus said. He wasn't. I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. And for a moment I was 12 again and he was 17 and he was erasing me from a whiteboard with a wave of his hand. I had spent so many years building things in the silence he had left me, and standing here in this room where his investors now knew my name and my numbers, I felt something I had not entirely expected to feel. Not triumph. Something more complicated than that. I want you to succeed, I said. I said it quietly just for him. I have always wanted you to succeed. That's why I protected the investment from the one variable that would have derailed it. I paused. Which was knowing I was involved. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. Something moved across his face that I couldn't name. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. Joel followed. I watched them go. The rest of the evening was professional and swift. Edward, Patricia, and I talked for 40 minutes in a quieter corner of the ballroom. Rachel joined us after 20, having been found by David, who had seen the group form and understood without being told that the meeting had become significant. The younger investor, whose name turned out to be Daniel Park from a growth equity firm out of Milwaukee, sat slightly outside our circle and listened, which I respected. By 10 p.m. I had agreed to step formally out of the lakefront structure within 30 days and take a named board seat at Vertex. Edward confirmed Crane Capital's Series C participation was intact pending updated diligence. Patricia Lowell expressed interest in co-investing on a smaller position. I texted my attorney at 10:12 p.m., start the lakefront dissolution docs. I'll call in the morning. She replied 11 minutes later with a single thumbs-up emoji, which is exactly the kind of attorney she is and exactly why I hired her. I found my coat. I stood for a moment in the lobby of the Langham looking at the river through the glass. The water was black and moving and the city lights ran across it in long wavering lines. I thought about Marcus. About the specific texture of his face in that moment when he understood what had happened. I had imagined that moment in the abstract way you imagine things you don't entirely intend to cause, many times over the past 14 months. I had imagined feeling clean about it. Finished. I did not feel finished. I called my mother on the way to my car. She answered on the second ring. She was watching television. I could hear the familiar background sound of the evening news she always kept on while she did other things. "It's late," she said without concern. "Just noting." "I know. I wanted to hear your voice." Pause. Then more gently, "What happened?" "Something with Marcus," I said. "Nothing bad. Just something." My mother was quiet for a moment. She has always had the particular intelligence of a woman who understood everything happening around her and chose, strategically, what to acknowledge and what to set aside. "He's proud," she said. "He's always been afraid of not being the smartest person in the room." "I know. That's not your fault, Diane. I know that too. But you feel it anyway." I didn't answer. The car pulled up and I got in. "Come for dinner Sunday," she said. "Bring Lily. I'll make the rice. She'll hold you to that." "She should." I said I would. Pause. "Get some sleep." I said I would. I probably wouldn't. But I said I would. In the weeks that followed, the practical matters resolved with the efficient momentum of things that had been in motion longer than they appeared. The lakefront dissolution was completed in 26 days. My attorneys, mine and Vertex's, who were now on slightly different footing than they had been, worked through the structural transition without significant friction. I took a seat on the Vertex board. Edward Crane's diligence concluded and the Series C closed at $38 million, $2 million below the original target, adjusted for the revised cap table disclosure. Standard practice, no drama. Patricia Lowell came in for $4 million. Daniel Park's firm declined, which was fine. Joel Hartley called me the Wednesday after the gala. He was careful and professional and clearly embarrassed by proxy for Marcus's behavior. We had a 20-minute conversation about the operations roadmap that was genuinely useful. Joel was a better operator than Marcus gave him credit for. I made a note to correct that dynamic at the board level. Marcus did not call for 11 days. When he did, it was a Saturday morning. I was at the park with Lily, who was performing a complex negotiation with Gerald the elephant regarding the terms under which Gerald would be permitted to go on the slide. I answered on the third ring. "Hey," Marcus said. "Hey." Silence. Long enough that Lily looked up at me from the sandbox, curious about why I had gone still. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. He said it the way people say things they have practiced. Careful, complete, slightly wooden from the rehearsal. "You do," I agreed. More silence. He stopped. "I've done this my whole life, haven't I? With you." I watched Lily convince Gerald that the slide was safe. I thought about 17 years of dinners and hand gestures, and she doesn't understand our business and she fades into the background. I thought about being 12 and hearing the words and filing them away and building something in the silence. "Yes," I said. "You have." "I'm sorry, Diane." The thing about apologies is they can be real and insufficient at the same time. His was both. I knew that even as I received it. The damage of 20 years is not repaired by 11 days of reflection and a phone call from a park. And something in Marcus's voice suggested he knew that too. "I hear you," I said. "Not it's okay. Not we're fine. Just I hear you." We talked for another few minutes about the board structure, which was easier. He had questions about my plans for the operational review. I answered them directly and without warmth and also without cruelty because both of those things were accurate. When I hung up, Lily was watching me from the bottom of the slide with Gerald tucked under her arm. "Was that Uncle Marcus?" she asked. "It was." "Is he still grumpy?" I almost laughed. "He's working on it." She considered this with the serious evaluative weight that 6-year-olds apply to character assessments. "Gerald says grumpy people are usually scared." I looked at my daughter. The October light was in her hair. Gerald's trunk was tucked firmly under her elbow. "Gerald is very wise," I said. "I know," she said and went back to the slide. "I have thought in the months since about what it means to win something you never intended to enter as a competition. Vertex is performing well. The Series C capital is deployed against a product roadmap that I now have meaningful input into, and the Q1 numbers have been the strongest in the company's history. Marcus is adjusting to the new dynamic with the unevenness of someone who was never taught how to occupy the second most powerful position in a room. Some board meetings are easier than others. We are building something that resembles, cautiously, a professional relationship. It is not a reconciliation. I want to be honest about that. There is a version of this story where the gala becomes the turning point and the family reforms around a new understanding and everything is different. That version is not this version. What Marcus and I have is functional, improving, and probably as much as is available to us given the architecture of who we were built to be to each other. I have made my peace with that. What I have not made my peace with, and perhaps never entirely will, is the cost of the method. 14 months of anonymity. Of being in the room structurally while being erased from it socially. Of building the position that made the truth inevitable while staying carefully invisible so the business could breathe. I protected Vertex by being unseen. And the habit of being unseen when you have practiced it since you were 12, leaves marks. Lily asked me once why I didn't tell people how much money I had. We were in the car on the way to school and she had heard something at a birthday party. A parent's comment, overheard, reassessing, and she was processing it with the directness of a child who has not yet learned to let things pass. Some information, I told her, is more powerful when it's kept quiet. She thought about this for the length of 2 traffic lights. Like a secret weapon, she said. Something like that. But weapons are for fighting, she said. Are you fighting someone? I thought about Marcus at the gala. About the whiteboard gesture. About the word non-factor landing in a room and me standing near a marble column, watching, filing, waiting without intending to wait. Not anymore, I said. She seemed satisfied with that. She looked out the window at the passing city with the focused interest she brought to all visual information. I drove. The skyline was ahead of us, catching the morning light. I thought about my apartment with its balcony that faces toward the city rather than away from it. About that detail mattering more than it should. About the specific weight of choosing, finally, to be visible. It is a different kind of power than the silent kind. Louder. More exposed. I'm still learning how to carry it. But I am learning.